Welcome to the Cinema Club podcast. I am your host, Nick Leach, and today we are going to be diving into the final finale episode, episode 9 of HBO's The Last of Us. It's a little bit of a bittersweet moment for us because it's been such an amazing time that we've had going over this series. And just to be completely clear, before we get any further, we always want to start our episodes with a big spoiler warning because we will be talking about anything and everything about this episode.
There's that hospital the Firefly mentioned. This is where we get off.
We finish what we started.
Welcome to the Fireflies.
Let me see her, please.
She's being prepped for surgery. I knew her since she was born. I promised her mother I would look after her.
Where was the operating room?
I just know halfway with this. After all we've been through. It can't be for nothing.
And joining me, as always, for this final episode is Chris and Paige. So welcome back, guys.
Yeah, this is bittersweet. I've been really enjoying this show, obviously. And yeah, I mean, I was also, a little bit worried. We were kind of talked about it before, a little bit worried about the runtime. This is going to be, I think, the shortest episode of the whole season, and I knew kind of what to expect as far as content that was going to be going on in this last episode that they still hadn't covered from the game. So I really was a little anxious about it, but I had a really nice time with this episode. And I think it did a nice job, not only following the game, but also really wrapping up the story nicely, at least for season 1.
Absolutely. I thought that it ended the season out very well. From what I've heard, it follows the game exactly how it ended. So I was very happy with this episode. It was beautiful. It was exactly what I wanted. And really makes me excited. It does a really good job at bookending, and like you were worried about in the last week's episode, you were worried about a cliffhanger. This doesn't do that. It wraps up this chapter number 1 up very nicely with a nice little bow. So I'm very happy with it, and let's just jump right in. Episode 9 starts with a flashback going all the way back to the beginning of Ellie's story. It's 14 years early, and a pregnant Anna is being chased by a clicker through the trees. She runs across a field and takes refuge in a large house where she and a group of people have been staying, but she finds it empty. She rushes up the stairs to find safety, pausing at the top to find that her water has broken. She runs into the room and barricades the door as downstairs she hears the clicker break through the window. She goes into labor and her screams draw the clicker upstairs and it begins to pound on the door. Anna picks up her switchblade knife as she pushes through her contractions. The clicker bursts through the door and rushes at Anna. Anna holds off the clicker and finally stabs it in the head, but unfortunately she has been bitten in the leg. She's interrupted hearing crying below her, and she finds that Ellie is laying on the floor, still attached by an umbilical cord. Anna quickly cuts the umbilical cord and holds baby Ellie close to her. Hours later, Marlene and a couple other men come back to the house and find Anna singing to Ellie with her knife to her neck. She makes Marlene promise to take care of Ellie. Marlene reluctantly agrees, and Anna pleads with her to shoot her. Marlene refuses and heads out the door, but she pauses, hands the baby to one of the men, and goes back into the room and shoots Anna. Man, what a way to start this episode. We have been talking about the fact that Ashley Johnson, who played Ellie in the original game, was going to be here. We had been teased about it through the trailers. We knew she was coming, and I know that you and Paige and I had been speculating where it was going to be, but they waited till this last episode for us to finally see Ashley, and what a performance, man.
Yeah, no, I think she did a great job. I haven't really gotten to, see her as an actress in any like television or movies before, but I really liked seeing her here, obviously. And I thought she did a great job in in playing that role.
The only other instances I've seen her in film was she did play a small role in The Avengers as a waitress that Captain America saves. And then she also is a part of a YouTube channel called Critical Role that is really into D&D, which I absolutely love that YouTube channel. They're great.
When we heard Ashley Johnson's panting through the woods, me as a fan, I got goosebumps because I was like, that is Ellie. And we got to relive her again and listen to her and see her live in action. But the whole like first part of it, you just could feel, I thought that it was Ashley Johnson handing the torch over to Bella Ramsey as the new Ellie. It was just very cool to see.
It's just a beautiful art imitating life here in this character. I mean, Ashley was Ellie and Ellie was Ashley, and the creators, when they went to adapt the video game to the screen, they were writing with Ashley Johnson's Ellie in mind. And so when they went to cast it, they had Ashley Johnson's Ellie in mind. And so when they finally cast Bella Ramsey as Ellie, it's as if Bella Ramsey's Ellie was birthed via Ashley Johnson's Ellie. It's just so beautiful. And they even include the little detail of the umbilical cord being what made it so that Ellie was immune. And it's a physical representation, I thought, of the fact that Ellie's mom is Anna, connected to Anna still, and that's what saves her. It's beautiful.
And getting a background on how she became immune, because we never knew that before. We never knew that in the game. It was nice that they thought of that to tell us, because I was always curious. I'm like, how did this little girl become immune to this really bad apocalypse?
Yeah, and I really liked that we got this whole, like 12-minute scene flashback kind of beginning of the episode here. I mean, we haven't really gotten a flashback starting out one of these episodes for a while. And so I did like that, hey, we're kind of going back to that. That's kind of how like the first like 2 or 3 episodes started out, So I liked that aspect. And then I also really liked that, none of this is part of the video game. We never really get to actually find out why Ellie is immune. It's kind of like a mystery. So I liked that they really kind of thought about that aspect and were like, hey, what can we do? And kind of came up with this creative aspect to include, Ashley Johnson in it as well. And then, I think you were telling me the other day, Nick, kind of a little bit about the baby actors here. I think they did a really nice job.
Yeah, so the babies were actually a pair of twins, fraternal twins, a boy and a girl. And they said that on set, the girl baby actually was the better actor. And it actually saved them a lot of money because anytime they had to use the boy, they had to digitally paint out the boy part. So they did a great job. These babies were amazing, and I'm so glad that they actually used real babies for this, because you can just tell in Ashley Johnson's acting, she plays off of them. I mean, there's moments in there that were not in the script, apparently, that Ashley Johnson just improvised in the moment because of what she was playing off of.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah. I did think it was funny, Marlene's like, cover the baby's ears. And then it pans over to like hearing, Ellie's mom get shot, and the baby starts crying, and the guy didn't cover up the baby's ears at all. I'm like, you had one job. You had one job. But I just think like the acting and just the tension, in this whole, like I said, like 12-minute beginning of the episode was great because she's running through the woods. She's running to the house. Her water breaks, like a, oh shit moment.
Also finding out her switchblade, which I lovely have tattooed on my arm, which is nice to know where she got that from.
I feel like especially, as you're in the second game, you play as Ellie a lot more than in the first one. And, she's always using that knife. If nothing else, you always got that knife on you. If you don't have any ammo or arrows or no bricks nearby or bottles, you always got that knife. So I thought that was pretty cool that they really kind of gave that to us as an audience as something really special to Ellie that she carries around.
And I think it's an important question for us to ask. Why tell the story of Ellie's birth now? Because up to really the last episode, it's been Joel's story. So why bring this story now? Why wait till the last episode? Why spend 10 minutes of the hour or the 50 minutes that we had of the runtime to tell this story?
Yeah, I think, you know, we've had the story of, oh, she's immune, but we've been like, oh, this kind of gives more momentum behind that. It also helps us kind of flesh out more of Marlene's connection with Ellie, because Marlene's connection with Ellie isn't really super strong in the game. So I liked that they really took some time to build that up a little bit better here in the show. So I like that aspect a lot as well.
I also think that it's, as Joel opens up more and more, we see that Ellie closes up more and more because of the trauma that she's experiencing. And I think that we are seeing Ellie more as the main character. That's what started in episode 7 when we went away from Joel's story, because up to this point, like I said, Joel has been our main character. We find that Joel has been placed with this task of taking Ellie, but when he opens up more to her, then we start to see now her trauma that she has to deal with and how Joel has to help her through that trauma. And it is becoming more and more Ellie's story, kind of as you even alluded to in previous episodes, that Ellie may have to be more independent as we go further into her story.
Yeah, I think it's just something along the lines of like Bella Ramsey is showcasing that she really can shoulder more of the brunt, more of the heavy lifting in this show. You know, as we've kind of seen in the last, like, I would say like 2-3 episodes, she's really, I feel like her character is really coming into her own, but I also feel like from an acting standpoint, she's really getting an opportunity, especially in episode 8, to really showcase those acting chops that she has, which is really exciting to see.
And I think too, we see a lot more how Ellie's journey really is very much antithetical to Joel's struggle of failure, because he's failed everyone close to him. He's failed Sarah. He failed Tess. He's failed Ellie over and over again. He's failed Tommy. He's failed everyone. But Ellie, on the other hand, from the first moments, literally the first breaths of her life, everyone has failed her. Her mother failed her. Marlene has failed her and will fail her again. Joel has failed her multiple times. Tess and Sam in dying failed her. And her mother, of all people, her mother is supposed to be the closest person to her, the person who's supposed to take care of her, whose the motherly duties are to protect her child. And she can't do that because she's going to be gone in a couple hours.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not like a lot of people. Yeah. Like, and it's interesting too, like, because like some of these people have made choices that have led them to letting Ellie down. And then others, you know, have like her mother, for example, like really didn't have much say in the matter, and they're just trying their best. Or, you know, even her friend / girlfriend / love interest, you know, that's something where they're trying to be that person that doesn't fail Ellie in that situation. And, you know, life happens in the apocalypse, you know, shit happens. And those things, I think, really, you know, as you kind of alluded to, really weigh on you after a while. And that's, I think, where Ellie has really attached to Joel on this whole journey, where it's like, oh, he doesn't let me down. He's always there. He's in my corner.
Well, even if he does fail, because he has failed her multiple times, even if he does, he will not give up and he will not stop trying.
Yes. Whereas, you know, to contrast that a little bit, we have Marlene, who's like, okay, I'm going to stick in Fedra school and peace out of here as I'm fighting Fedra, you know. Weird, but that's what we're working with here.
So back in the present, Joel and Ellie arrive in Salt Lake City, where they hope to find the Fireflies in their medical facility. Ellie is a bit distant and withdrawn, and Joel can see it They enter a skyscraper to get a better view of the city, and Ellie spots something and takes off upstairs. Joel follows her, concerned, and finds himself standing face to face with a giraffe eating some vegetation that has grown up the building. Joel takes some leaves and hands some to Ellie to feed to the giraffe, and he can see Ellie let down her walls just a little bit. The two contemplate whether they should go back to Tommy and Jackson or keep going to find the fireflies.
Yeah, I really liked this whole setup here. I mean, we have Ellie, we have Joel. Obviously, it's been a little bit of time since episode 8 occurred, I'm guessing here. And Ellie's not okay, obviously. And Joel, they kind of switch roles, whereas before Ellie's been the one trying to make conversation, break into Joel's shell. Now it's the reverse. Joel's like, hey, I found Chef Boyardee. He's getting all these things that he's trying to cheer her up. He's also like, something I liked is that Joel teaches Ellie how to play guitar in the second game. And they kind of allude to that here as well, because Joel's like, oh, I saw this old, smashed up guitar, but it got me thinking about, oh, I should jump back into that. Little details like that are really making me appreciate a lot of the writing in this story and in the show. But I also really liked here, something that as a player of the game, you do quite a bit is you are always hoisting Ellie up places high, and she's always lowering like a ladder or some kind of device for you to utilize to climb up. And I really liked that they finally did that here. I was like, oh, cool. Okay. Little shot of that. But it's also the same thing happens here where she's lowering the ladder and then just kind of like drops it. And Joel's like, hey, what the hell? Like, where are you going? Come back. And she's like running to go see something. And then, he finally gets up there and we have that really cool giraffe moment, which I was personally a little worried that they were not going to include that part in the show just because of the runtime again, which they did a really good job with that actually. But I really love the giraffe scene. I know I've kind of said it a couple times throughout the show, but it's a very iconic, I guess, for me, like moment. Like I want to get like one of the posters from the game of this moment. It's just one of my favorites.
And from what I understand, it was actually a shot for shot remake of the cutscene because Craig Mazin said that he did not want to change something that was already perfect, and so he didn't.
The giraffe scene melted my heart because I was waiting for that for so long, because it was a really pretty scene with the green, the giraffe roaming around. And thank God that they used an actual giraffe. And from the making of The Last of Us, they apparently found him at was it a Canadian zoo or something? That scene was kind of like the amazing, touching moment between Ellie and Joel together, just feeding this wild animal that used to be captivated and now is free and roaming around this really deadly world, but it's thriving too.
I think it's one of the themes that is throughout this show, and that is nature recapturing its own.
There you go. That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, I like that. That was like the most famous scene in the first part of the game too, when it came out. That was always like the trailers and whatnot. So
they could have just as easily, whether or not it would have been more money or whatever, they could have just as easily used CGI. But I love just the fact that they used a real giraffe, because you can absolutely tell that it was real.
Yeah. I mean, when my wife and I, Sarah, were watching it, I was like, wow, this giraffe is really, really good. Dang, like how much money they spent on making this giraffe. And then like come to find out, like looking kind of behind the scenes, like everything was CGI except the giraffe basically in that scene. But I think it, like you said, it was really cool that they utilized the real giraffe, because I think it evokes more of a genuine emotion from Ellie. I also think that this is the same as is in the game, obviously, because like you said, it basically is shot for shot from the game. Joel is looking at Ellie in that moment where she is having that genuine joy. And I kind of see the wheels working in his head where he's reminded of what real happiness is. Because I don't think he's had a genuine happy moment like that since probably Sarah was around.
Then Sarah and him were watching the movie together that night.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that was like a genuine, like human moment here with the giraffe. And I also like that Ellie is a 14-year-old girl. And I mean, I forget about that quite a lot because of all the crazy shit she's going through and having to.
He's dealt with a lot of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think again, after this giraffe scene, when they're kind of standing there, I think we really see Joel fully embrace and realize that Ellie is his purpose in that moment. Obviously they have that conversation. Ellie's like, hey, I want to finish the mission. But Joel doesn't give a shit about the mission anymore. He's doing this for her at this point now. But I think that giraffe moment really plays into Joel fully realizing and embracing that this is his whole life's purpose now, is to protect this girl.
That was kind of like the foreshadowing of what he's going to do in the next sequences of the episode too. And you could also tell in her eyes that she finishes what she starts, and she wants to do this and do it with him because he's her protector and they started this. Let's finish it and see where we go. It was a bonding moment, but also you could tell what was going to happen. I mean, I don't know if you saw or knew what was going to happen, Nick, but I knew what was going to happen. So I think for gamers that played the game and watched the show, I think it kind of ruined some things for us too, because we didn't get that experience to relive everything for the first time. But it was nice to relive it in person, I guess. So I wish I got to see it for the first time, like everyone else that wasn't a gamer.
I just love how they wrote this part and this dialogue on the top of the roof here and a little bit later, because Ellie and Joel are both very closed off people. They don't really allow their emotions to be shown in all their glory. They don't allow the other person really to know what's going on. But when Ellie says, we could go anywhere and I will follow you once we've done this thing, that's the moment that she is saying, I love you to Joel. And a little bit later, Joel then also does the same thing. And so Joel and Ellie do continue to search the city, and they come across an abandoned army medical encampment. And Joel reveals that the scar on his head is a result of him trying to take his own life after Sarah's death, but that he flinched at the last second. Ellie tells him she's glad it didn't work. As Ellie tries to lighten the mood with some jokes, suddenly they're ambushed by a stun grenade. A man grabs Ellie, and Joel is knocked out by the butt of a gun. And just as I was saying, conversely, when Ellie says, I love you in the only way that she can, it's in this moment when Ellie says, time heals all wounds, and Joel says, it wasn't time that did it. That's him saying, I love you back to her. And the writing is just so good, because in any lesser work comparatively to this show, a lesser director would have said, okay, now both of you hug each other. But they don't, because this is more real. This is more what a actual human would do and how they would react.
Yeah, I mean, I got little chills when you just quoted, it wasn't time that did it. Honestly, like that was again such a human moment in the middle of the apocalypse. Basically, like I also enjoy and like that they decided in the show to have Joel tell that story of almost taking himself out. Really opening up and being honest with her, because in the game, that isn't something that's ever really brought up. I mean, the closest thing to that is like, one time Ellie and Joel are like in this abandoned house and there's some skeletons in there, and Ellie's like, oh, they took the easy way out. They killed themselves. And Joel says something along the lines of like, oh, it's not the easy way out, actually. And that's as close to this moment of him really opening up and showcasing that he's had to deal with really very real suicidal thoughts. And so I really like that, because we know that Joel really just decides to fully be transparent and open with Ellie here. And obviously that dynamic of their relationship changes a little bit in the future. But in this moment, he is really just opening up and showing and telling Ellie, this is me. I just want you to know, like, this is who I am. This is something that I've struggled with. And like you're saying, like they're going about this in a very human, but also true to character way in the writing of how they would actually be opening up with one another and sharing, hey, I care and love about you.
Joel has a hard time like expressing his feelings, and he always tries to take the harder way to do things instead of like coping through them or talking about them or expressing himself and finding help. So having Ellie be that person for him, now you could just tell that it was just like she saved him, even though he wasn't trying to commit suicide at this moment, but she saved him even though he's trying to save her.
But then what's also really true to character is what they do next. And that is they now try to deflect all this raw emotion with humor. And so Joel asks for more puns. And
Yes.
so she does. And then just immediately that moment is ruined again by that stun grenade and them getting knocked out and taken somewhere else. So Joel wakes up in a hospital bed with Marlene standing over him. He asks where Ellie is, and Marlene says that she's being prepped for surgery. Joel asks why, and Marlene explains that their doctors believe that they have found a way to create a cure for the infection and that Ellie is the key. Unfortunately, the plan revolves around the doctors removing the part of her brain producing the chemical that makes her immune to the fungal infection, and Joel realizes that there is no way that Ellie is going to come out alive. Marlene says that she has no choice, and Joel refuses to accept Ellie's fate. Marlene instructs her guards to take Joel out of the city and to shoot him if he tries anything.
Yeah, I mean, when we see the fireflies throw that smoke grenade or whatever that is, I was like, oh boy, here we go. Yeah, I think this is when it's something we've been exploring. It's something we've been exploring in this show, but morality and ethics, I think, are something that the game and this show does a really nice job of presenting to us as an audience or a player.
I mean, this is a very good example of the trolley problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you going to kill the few to save the many, or save the person you love but kill the rest of humanity?
Yeah. And even so, like going to a bit further, Marlene doesn't give Ellie a choice in the matter. And we can assume maybe what Ellie would or would not want to do. But I think Marlene just did a really terrible job of handling the situation as a whole.
Yeah, I think if Ellie had been given the chance, Ellie would have absolutely said, I'll sacrifice my life for everybody so that it will cure. But Marlene doesn't give her that choice because Marlene is extremely pragmatic. All she cares about is taking care of the many, saving the world. And I mean, Marlene has been there since the beginning. When Ellie says in episode 1, "What are you, my mom?" Though she isn't, Ellie's mother entrusted her best friend Marlene to take care of Ellie. And what does Marlene do? She doesn't take care of Ellie. She just puts her in a Fedra school so that she can be raised by Fedra. And what an interesting choice for her to give her best friend's kid to the enemy. Whether or not that was for Ellie's protection or not, she just farms her off to somewhere else so that she can go back to doing what she does best, and that's making the hard decisions that will save the largest amount of people. And what she's doing here is she's doing the same thing again. She's detached herself from this girl that her best friend asked her to raise, and so she's now willing to kill this person to save all of mankind.
Yeah, I was kind of more pissed off at Marlene because if it was your bestie's little kid, why wouldn't you try to protect her and not just like send her away? Even when you knew that your best friend's daughter could save the world. So you find this random man that sells drugs and you want him to go bring her somewhere. I don't understand. I know she's the leader of the Fireflies, but like it just made me kind of hate her a little more compared to the game. The game, I knew she was just kind of like a helper, like get her to point A to point B.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to, we were kind of discussing last week leadership styles, kind of comparing and contrasting that. And I think, again, we see another example of a leadership style and a group mentality here, which is always fun to explore, especially in a post-apocalyptic world. But yeah, Marlene wasn't even going to let Joel say goodbye to her. I mean, really cold. And something else too that, she alludes to is that Marlene's like lost half of her crew just getting to this point. They don't seem to have done any tests on Ellie beforehand, and they don't seem to have their shit together in general. I mean, if they fail at this, they'll have missed their one chance at, presumably saving the world.
Like, what is the only option in existence? This option that the first option we're going to try is kill this kid. Like, we're not going to try anything else.
Right. It's like, hey, let's do little tests here and there. Nope. We're just going to go right into surgery. And apparently we got this all figured out ahead of time, which maybe they do. But from Joel's perspective, one can definitely make the argument that he makes the right call here. The chances of this vaccine thing working out seem pretty slim, in my opinion, anyway. And I'm sure, with the information Marlene shared, which is bare to none, like it's no wonder that he, decides for that and many other reasons to take action in the way he does.
So as Joel is being marched out of the hospital, he overpowers and kills the guards and picks up their gear before setting out to save Ellie. Joel battles his way through the hospital, mercilessly finishing off anyone who stands in his path. Joel finally makes it to the operating room where Ellie is unconscious on the operating table, being prepped for surgery. He shoots the surgeon in the head when he stands in Joel's way, and Joel has the nurses disconnect Ellie before picking her up and walking out. Joel makes it to the parking garage where Marlene stops him. She begs him at gunpoint to stop and give Ellie back so that the cure can be created, but Joel refuses and kills Marlene as she lowers her guard.
Yeah.
What a sequence. Like, this is the battle sequence, but the choice that they made for this to slow it down, to give it a bit of slow motion and play really, really somber music is such a choice. And in my opinion, was exactly the right choice for this, because it showcases that Joel has turned off every part of himself that is anything but a killer. This is the Joel that we didn't see when we met him 20 years later with Tess. This is the Joel that everybody, that even Marlene, has alluded to the fact that he did some really bad things and why Tommy decided to leave Boston in the first place. We see finally what Joel is fully capable of, and it is intense, it is brutal, it is merciless.
Yeah, I mean, he shoots that first guy for survival on the staircase, and then he takes out the second guy after he asks him, where is she? And he's like, I don't have time for this. After the guy is like, I'm not going to tell you shit or whatever. He shoots him right in the head, goes on his merry way. And I was kind of talking to you about this, Nick, before too. Like, on my initial watch through, I've been kind of hyping up this whole part of the series because it's such a cool part of the game. You're like taking down, fireflies level by level in this hospital, working your way up, sneaking around, taking people out from behind, in firefights everywhere. And with the first watch through, I didn't really know how to feel about how they handled this. I had mixed emotions, but I did rewatch it last night. And I really think, like you were kind of saying, Nick, that they did a nice job here.
One could argue, I think, that it was for time's sake, because as we've said, this has a very condensed time period for this. But it's clear to me that this was more of a choice than we don't have time, because they could have made this episode as long as they wanted, but they decided not to. They could have made this fight sequence a longer fight sequence which maybe could even have been like a oneer. And even they said that in the official podcast that there were versions of this part that had some crazy action music playing on top, and it was a bit longer, and it was really an action piece. But Then somebody had the idea that they should slow it down, and they went to the composer and asked for the most somber, saddest, most depressing music that he could make for this, and it completely changes the tone of what this is, because this is the most action, arguably the most action we've seen in the show so far, but it doesn't feel like it.
They completely muted most of the gunfight and had the music kind of overpower it, which to me made it feel like nothing mattered to him at this moment. The gunfight didn't matter. It was him. His goal was to get Ellie and get out. So I like how they did that. So we were in his point of view, his mindset, the whole thing.
I feel like, at least what's on top of my head, the last big action sequence was probably, when they're run away from Kathleen and all those clickers come out of the grounds. And that was handled in a really nice way. But I think, maybe part of the reason why they decided to not go full action in your face in this sequence of events was, I think it might have bordered on violence porn, basically. We're just throwing it in there because we can. And so I now do like you're kind of saying, Nick, how they decided to take more of a creative approach with it. And I think the music, like you just touched on, does a really nice job of really showing what's going on in Joel's head. That desperation, that love and rage just takes over. He's not taking any prisoners. People are putting up their hands and surrendering, and he's just shooting them.
He's a machine. He's not human anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that music, it swells and overpowers the sound. And it's like his desperation in that moment is what's fully driving Joel along with that love. Those things are combined there. And I think as an audience, we can sit there and be like, oh, we get it. We understand why is doing this. It's not just this, all right, sequence of events of high action and blood everywhere. We really are getting with the way they decided to go here, more of Joel's headspace throughout the entire ordeal.
And his headspace is such that anything that is in his, number one, in his way, and that is seen in his mind as a threat to him and Ellie is what he takes out. He takes every single person with a gun out, and then when he finally gets to the surgery room in the pediatric wing, he bursts in the door, and the only person he shoots is that doctor, because the doctor is standing in his way with a knife in hand who could have been a threat, but he doesn't shoot the other nurses. He lets them live. He doesn't allow anybody else in the compound to live but these nurses, because they're not a threat to him anymore.
And also, they aren't a threat to Ellie. That he's got a scalpel. He's ready to start surgery. He's like, all right, well, you're in my way, and your arm. So, he just pops him right in the head. The person that could have potentially saved everyone, humanity. But Joel hasn't ever really been the normal hero, and he's not really necessarily a good guy, but he has a good heart. And, Joel is willing to do things most people won't to survive. But here he's doing all of that for Ellie to survive, which again, I really do love, whether it's whatever format, read books, television, film, the gray characters, where it's wow, I really am torn here between what is the ethical choice in the situation.
And I think that you can make the argument that Joel's morality isn't good. He's, like you said, he's not the good guy. He may not have made the right choice here for humanity, because he does kill that doctor who could have potentially figured out some better way, given time to find a better cure. But he doesn't. But he made the right choice for Joel. And it goes back to episode 1. Joel could have stopped and saved those people on the side of the road. He could have stopped and saved the neighbors, but he didn't, because his moral code is completely driven by those he is loyal to and those that he loves. He thinks of nothing else but, let's protect the people that I love.
Which I think is a very human response in that situation.
Was it the right choice? For the world, no, but for the love of Ellie and Joel, yes. And that was the whole point. I don't really think it was the best choice that he could make, but it was the choice that he wanted to make.
And I think that we can argue that there was no choice.
Yeah, exactly. And also when Marlene said they think they could figure it out or they think they have a cure, I mean, if I was in that position, I'd probably second guess it too. I mean, and Ellie didn't really have a say in it either. They just knocked her out and put her on the table. So I know that Joel's love is very strong, and you could definitely see it after Ellie told him that he would follow anywhere he goes. So that flip switched in his head too.
And I think the other question that we have to ask, because Joel kills everyone in the hospital, did he have a choice there at the end to let Marlene go?
I believe there was a choice, but he made the right choice for him, because I feel like she would still come after Ellie no matter what. There was always that chance that she would find another team and go hunt them down. So in his point of view, yes, it was the right thing to do. But for like ethically, no. I mean, but that's not what the show is about. So I think that he did the right thing for himself.
Because as we've said time and time again, this is not a show about right and wrong. This is a show about love. And love doesn't always make the right choice, morally speaking.
It's definitely one of his most dominant traits is love and cherishing and adoring the people that love him back. So
though he will never say it.
No, but you can see it in his little smirks and his actions, even though his actions are very aggressive and killing. But that's his way of showing love, I would say.
Right. I mean, yeah, even when he barges into the surgery room, he's telling those nurses, oh, wrap her arm because it's bleeding. It's like little details like that where it's like, oh, yeah, like he's showcasing his care and love there. And I also wanted to point out that Laura Bailey made an appearance, a cameo appearance in this episode too. She plays Abby in the second game, and she was one of the nurses in the operating room in this episode, which I thought was pretty cool that they incorporated her in that.
And I also read something that the person they used for Abby in the part 2, like the face actor, not like the voice, is now getting death threats again.
Oh my gosh.
About like everything. So she's like on the down low, and I'm pretty sure they were going to use her maybe for Abby in this if they continue on as different seasons. I don't know if it was an old article that I read, but I was like, damn, people just calm down. It's a TV show.
Just a TV show. It's just a video game.
I like that in this series as a whole, at least in my opinion, violence seems to be used sparingly in this show. And I think because of that it makes it more impactful. Like in episode 8, when Ellie is just, beating that guy completely to death, bludgeoning him to death there. And like there's blood on the lens and everything. It's like it's a lot more impactful, and we understand what's happening on an emotional level a lot better, just because it is used more sparingly than in the video game. And so when we have Joel like really go all out here, it felt more impactful, I think, because of how they chose to handle violence in the television series. That's
a good point. I didn't really think about that in that way.
Yeah, I was kind of like thinking like back. I'm like, oh, as a series as a whole, like what are the big things that are different? That was one of the things I thought about, because in the game, like you're taking out clickers all the time, taking out people all the time, and here it's like, oh, like it's more focused on their relationship a little bit more. But it also like I said, like when things do come up, when violence is needed, it's done so well that I think it's more impactful than the game in that regard.
For it only being like 40 to 50 minutes, I feel like they covered like the whole last portion of the game very smoothly.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, each episode in this season is kind of like a game missions.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was continuity and very smooth, but it was just like different portions of it.
And yeah, with Marlene there, I liked how they handled that. I mean, this episode basically is beat for beat from the game, but I really liked, where she's like, hey, like there's still time to make a different decision here. And then when he shoots her, puts Ellie in the car, comes back, and she's like, wait, don't. And he's like, you just come looking for her, and then pops her in the head. Like that's straight from the game too. But I just think seeing it, the big screen, so to speak, seeing it in real life like that makes it like, again, like more impactful for me as a viewer. It's like, whoa, we really did that.
And there was one little detail that I caught on as even not playing the game, but I caught as a nod to the game, but also just something in general that I have a little bit of a pet peeve in film and television is that when Joel runs out of ammo, he has only a defined amount of ammo. And so he gets rid of that gun and he picks up another gun off of one of the bodies that he has just killed so that he has another gun with more ammo again. I really like that detail because it's real.
Yeah, or when he's using Ellie's knife.
It's not like an infinite magazine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Ellie regains consciousness in the back of a pickup truck as Joel drives them back towards Jackson. She asks what happened, and Joel lies to her, saying that the Fireflies were unable to develop a cure and that there were others who were just like her, so she wasn't needed anymore. She also says that the Fireflies had been attacked by raiders and that Marlene had not made it out. Ellie turns back and falls asleep again. On their way to Wyoming, their truck breaks down and the two continue their journey on foot. Joel tells Ellie more about Sarah as they stop just outside Jackson. Ellie stops Joel, skeptical of Joel's story, and he swears to her that his story is true, and the two agree to move on from their last ordeal together into an uncertain future.
There's multiple ways that people were angry about the ending of the season, of why he lied or whatnot. Yes, he did lie, but no one is certain of the future. There could be more like her. They probably weren't going to find a cure. So I think of it as a little white lie to save her. I wasn't too angry. I also played the game, so I knew it was coming.
Yeah, but we also see that Ellie's a bit lost here because that was her purpose. And so she's having a hard time kind of finding her way a little bit here.
Because just like Marlene made the decision for her, Joel made the decision for her to save her, because like I said before, I think if Ellie had been given the option to choose, I think that there's a very good chance that she would have gladly given up her life to save humanity, but Joel didn't give her that choice either.
I don't think anyone really gave her that choice. I mean, they just knocked her out and put her on a table. I mean, it could have taken a bunch of different turns if they actually asked her. But yeah, she hasn't really had a say or direction in her life besides what people tell her to do.
Yeah, and I think, when I first played the game too, I've had the same thought. I think Joel knows Ellie probably wouldn't have approved of his decision and his actions. And I think that's why he decides to lie to her. But, throughout this whole process, we're seeing kind of the light come back to Joel's eyes while he's, telling her about Sarah, and he's kind of like going into like giddy daddy mode here over here. He's like, oh yeah, you and her would get along so well.
I would like to make the argument that I think that Joel is trying whatever he can to make it right, to make his decision not make him so culpable and so guilty in the eyes of Ellie. He doesn't want Ellie to see him any less than the person he wants to be for her, and that is as her being his daughter, his new daughter, and him being her father, and for him to take care of her because he loves her. And so I think that him running his mouth, maybe him being happy and all that, but also I think it's trying to cover up a little bit of his guilt and shame for what he did.
It's like that nervous babbling that I always do too. And I did really, really enjoy when you were like, he was like, Sarah's a lot more girlier. Not saying you're not girly. She's like, yeah, I know. Yeah, girl.
But I also want to note that Ellie isn't stupid. She sees the lie. Joel isn't the master manipulator that David was, and she knows him. But it's in the moment when Joel says, I swear, that I think that is where their relationship now changes forever. Because not only does she accept the lie he has told her, but from this point forward, she knows that she can't fully trust him. And I think that's something we're going to see in season 2. To her, this was the one thing that would have made her life matter, that would have made up for all the people that she lost. Her mother, Riley, Tess, Sam, Marlene, and Joel took that from her. And then he lied to her about it. And so I think that this is going to have repercussions that we can't even know. I mean, unless you played part 2, but
yeah, I liked that Ellie in this moment, at least what I'm interpreting it as, she's deciding to fully be open about herself. And so she opens up about Riley, which, if I'm remembering correctly, the DLC hadn't come out yet when when the game had. So, when she's talking about, oh, I had to kill my friend, we're kind of like, okay, but it has a lot more emotional impact, here in the show, because we got to see that relationship that Ellie and Riley had, and which I appreciated that they included here. But yeah, I feel like Ellie's really being transparent here. And then when she asks Joel to swear to her that, what he's told her was true, I think it's partially also because, yeah, she knows, but she also wants to try to convince herself, at least partially on some level, that what he's saying is true, and or if he's lying, it was for the best. I don't know. It's an interesting way to end the season, but it's exactly how the game ends. And it really made me think, like, for a while. I was like, oh, what was really Ellie seeing in that moment? I think it's up to interpretation a little bit, but it is a perfect ending for the season.
Episode was a lot more intense than it was in the game, so you didn't really get to deconstruct that whole conversation as well as you could as in the episode, which I really enjoyed because of Bella's just acting in general was amazing.
So that brings us to the end of this episode and the end of the show. It's been an absolutely amazing journey to get to this point. But I want to hear from both of you as we are now to the end of this journey. What has this season been like for you? Final thoughts about this season?
I want to say that they made one of, I don't know if it's one of the best now game adaptations. So this game came out in 2013 and I just graduated high school. So it brought back like a whole new memory back, but came to life this time, which was amazing to just relive and enjoy and have fun with it. I think HBO did an amazing job with every single thing, all the way down to the details, to the casting, to the cinematography, sound. I am amazed at what they could do, and I loved every moment of it, from the worst to the best parts.
Yeah, I mean, I got on the Last of Us train a little bit later, kind of funny enough, in 2020 when the world was ending. So
what a time to get into this game.
I know. I was like, but yeah, I think this season really sets up season 2 and 3, because I know we're going to have at least 2 more seasons, it sounds like, of the show, beautifully here. And I would really say that this is the best game to film adaptation ever, in my opinion. Like, I really enjoyed Arcane, but I've never played League of Legends, so I can't really speak to that adaptation, but I just really enjoyed that show. But this, like, far and away, in my opinion, is the best game to film adaptation ever. And I think it's largely because of, the decisions they made to really try and honor and stay true to the amazing game that they had made. I'm really happy that they did that, because a lot of people don't play games, and that's totally cool. That's fine. But now so many more people got to explore and really got to experience this story. Yeah, I really enjoyed this whole show and really enjoyed breaking it down with both of you guys. It's been really fun. I think it's something I'm always going to really look back on and be like, wow, that was such a cool thing that we took time to really break it down. And it's been really fun to be able to do that with a show that's been so awesome on so many levels. So yeah, I just wanted to say like thank you to Nick and Paige for this because it's been a really fun time. I'm glad, Nick, you were like, yeah, okay, I've never heard of this, but sure, let's spend the next 9 weeks covering this random television show coming out. Worked out great.
Well, I want to thank you, Chris, because if you hadn't encouraged me to get into this, I mean, I would have watched it probably regardless, but I'm so happy that this exists because I'm in the same boat as both of you. I think this is the best adaptation of a video game to have ever been made. And I want to make the statement that I made a little statement last week saying that it wasn't going to be better than the Game of Thrones, but I'm going to take that statement back and say that this has now become my favorite show of all time, favorite television show of all time. And it's because it's so real, it's so human. We've talked about it over and over. I think what makes it so special, you said it a little bit, Chris, is not just its devotion to the source material for it being so true to the game, but also how they honor the creation of the game. Everybody that was involved in the creation of the game was included in one way or another in this show. The fact that they included Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker and all the other cast of the original game in this show in beautiful ways, but also allowing a space for these new people in Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey to take these characters and make them their own, I think was just amazing. And also showcases just the genius that is Neil Druckmann in the creation of a story like this, bringing a story like this, number one, to a video game space, which is a mechanic we had never seen before to this point, done so well, but also Craig Mazin being a massive fan of the game, bringing it to screen. I don't think they could have done it with anybody else at the helm, and why I think that this will be a show that will be looked on for generations, for hundreds of years, as a show that really, I think, changed the space of adaptations. And not just the space of adaptations, but also allows for a space for stories like these to be told, because there's many stories. I mean, episode 3 is a good example. Episode 7 is another example to showcase just the inclusivity of every form of love that there is. And it's genius. It's a genius show, and I loved it. And I loved talking about it with you. But now it's over. Now this chapter is over, and we have now to look towards another chapter. Like you said, Chris, it's been already they've said that they are going to split part 2 into 2 seasons. So let's talk about it.
I think it's a very smart idea because part 2 is so dense in information, and just having 2 storylines, it would just be way too much to like do in one season. Because although we have 2 storylines in this season, we have Ellie and Joel, they're really going to dig deep further into Ellie and Abby in season 2. So I'm really happy that they get to do 2 seasons, which means we have 2 more seasons we can watch, which is also exciting and something to look forward to.
Absolutely. And I've, seen that, at least from a writing or creative standpoint, they are planning to change some things, which I'm really looking forward to seeing what they decide to do with that. Just because, I was kind of telling Nick earlier this week, the second game was and is very controversial, as you were kind of touching on, Paige, with the person who played Abby in the game, receiving death threats, which is, again, wild. But I am very interested to see what path they decide to take with this upcoming storyline.
And Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann have said that they're going to be repeating the same process that they did for season 1 with season 2. They're going to stay true to the game and also capitalize on what TV allows to do with the story, and also play with the ambiguity that this kind of story allows. So that's really encouraging to hear. I know that there has also been some rumors out there that Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog may be going back to potentially, hopefully, make a third game. But the one thing I want to say on that front is that I'd be a little bit concerned if Neil Druckmann was having to be pulled in two directions, being involved in the creation of a third game, but also be involved in the creation of season 2 and 3 of the TV show, because Neil Druckmann has been such a huge part of season 1 and making season 1 the amazingness that it is, that it concerns me that if he were being pulled in two directions, that season 2 and 3 may not get the same attention that season 1 did.
And I'm just selfish and I want a third game.
True fans can wait another 7 years, because we waited 7 years for part 2 to come out. We're gonna wait another 7, and who knows? They could already have things already planned. They don't want to spill the beans just yet, because that would just cause a riot in the fan base. So we never know.
And I don't know of how much involvement he's been a part of this or not, but Naughty Dog is coming out with a online game that is set in the Last of Us universe later this year, from my understanding. So I don't know how involved he's been with that, but if he was involved with both projects, both that game and this television show at the same time, then that obviously was a very successful way to go about spending his time, at least with the television series. So I'm interested in this game also coming out later this year. But yeah, I think, he's professional. He can handle it.
He's a big boy.
Exactly.
The other part that I had heard that they said, and I'm really, really excited about, is that they also said that on season 1, they were just playing with the idea and the rules of how this new version of the cordyceps fungal network worked, and that they're going to be exploring that even further. And for me, that's exciting, because I came into this being like, okay, we're going to see a lot of infected, and they were very, very sparing with how they actually used them. We didn't see actually a lot of infected. I mean, I have been comparing this show to The Walking Dead. I think it's the closest counterpart to the what this world is. And I think that in The Walking Dead, I personally felt like there were too many zombies. It just became senseless. It became not really believable. It just became, there's just too many. Whereas here, I feel like in The Last of Us, there weren't enough infected. And that just makes me yearn for more, and it makes me come back wanting more. So that's a really good place to be, I think.
Yeah. Kind of touching on just a quick thing I want to throw in there. Like, if you have a chance and haven't already done so, HBO released, I think it's called The Making of The Last of Us.
I watched that yesterday.
Oh, me too. I was like, oh, this is sick. Like, showing like all the makeup they did. Kind of insane. But anyway, I think since they are kind of leaning more into the fungi aspect of, that growing and then alerting clickers and whatnot to come get some grub, that, they've been more in northern cold climates in these last few episodes. And, we haven't really heard that, but that may be potentially why we've seen fewer clickers in the last couple episodes. Just a theory. I think it was something that might have played a factor in this, because I was kind of thinking that, when they got to the hospital, there might be some clickers around there, but there weren't, and they were obviously making a lot of noise in some of those situations. So that's kind of my takeaway is, okay, they're changing things up a little bit from the game. So maybe that is also potentially something they're also playing around with. Like I said, they're still setting up this world a little bit differently than the game.
Oh, and it's also nice because we get more of like an introduction and a background to all the characters instead of just fighting constantly, which, like you said, is nice we get them sparingly. So it's more exciting when they do come. So I did enjoy that.
So with that brings us to the end of this episode and the end of our limited series, our special series going into The Last of Us. So before we go, I just want to allow both of you to let us know where we can find you on social media if people have been living under a rock and haven't listened to an episode before this episode.
Yeah, how dare you not know about our podcast? No, you can follow me on Instagram at christophers.snap. shots, or Nick did just add me as an admin on the Facebook group. So you can always hit me up there as well.
Woo! You can also find me on Instagram at the wonderful at RacerXGirl. And on pretty much any social media, it's the same name across the board.
And as always, you can follow me at nick.fleeto.leach on Instagram and reach out to us on our Facebook group. But before we go, we have been kind of teasing some plans for this podcast going forward. And Chris and I wanted to get on here before we go to kind of tell you about this exciting news. From the start of this podcast, I've really been struggling with consistency. I mean, with the pandemic starting and going between a couple different jobs, working from home versus working in an office, the struggle really has been to find the time to schedule, record, and edit the podcast within these seasons of my life. However, I think that this podcast is something really special, and I've had such an amazing and fun time with all the conversations we've had with our guests, talking about the movies and the TV shows that we love. And I mean, I've even been introduced to some movies I probably wouldn't have watched if it weren't for this podcast. I am also fully aware of the difficulty to grow a podcast only releasing one episode every month, and especially if we don't do that consistently. And that's something that we want to change. So with full transparency, I want to announce that we have finally come up with a plan that we think will benefit this podcast to combat those issues. And Chris really has been my biggest supporter, and he texts me all the time about the podcast and his thoughts and suggestions of movies and shows that we should cover, and encourage me to keep coming back to the episodes when I've taken a break. So I finally went to him and asked if he might be able to help me, since it's clear he has a passion about this podcast. And it is my pleasure to announce that Chris is going to be joining me officially as a second host to this podcast going forward.
Yeah, I am super excited about this. The podcast has been a really great creative outlet for me, especially, over the last few years with, as Nick was kind of touching on, a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of things that have been changing in the world, and really enjoying getting together and discussing film, especially with new people within the club. So, like Nick was saying, Nick and I got together to lay out, kind of a plan for the podcast moving forward to try and be more consistent, and at the same time also release more content for you, our listeners. So we are going to be releasing 2 episodes a month on a bi-weekly basis. Nick and I are going to be fully taking over and independently be in charge of one episode each month, where we will post the episode and then invite more people to join us. I think is really great because that'll also enable us to keep growing our community. And then we may not always be together on the same episodes, Nick and I, but we do plan to make some episodes still together. And like kind of Nick was saying, like the whole point of this club is that we can bring more of you, the members of our club, to be part of the episodes.
Exactly. I mean, what makes this podcast so special, in my opinion, is the fact that you can just be anyone and be just a part of our club, but you can be on this podcast. But in order to make us to be able to be successful and get to a place to see these plans fully realized, we're planning on taking the month of April off so that we can finalize our plans and situate us to really hit the ground running in May. We also have plans to utilize the Facebook club community more in order to engage with our members even more between this time and also going forward between the episodes. So if you have not already joined our community, you can join us at facebook.com/groups/the Cinema Club TCC and listen to us anywhere you find your podcasts. Anchor Podcast, who has been hosting us, has actually been turned into Spotify for podcasters. So we are very excited to be a part of the Spotify team now. And as always, please leave us a review on iTunes because it will really help us reach new listeners. And message Chris and me on Facebook if you would ever like to be a part of a future episode of the podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you very, very soon on the next one.